This is an Eye on Annapolis bonus podcast.
Well, we're here at the village of Providence Point, and it's not really the village yet, but we are at their, I guess the sales center is the proper name of this, at the Annapolis Exchange Parkway, which is across from the mall. So if anybody is interested in checking out what is to come down the road, you definitely want to come check that out. And we are meeting with a whole bunch of people. We got a big conference room. It's like we're a corporate board or something here, but with the National Lutheran Communities and Services, as well as Richardson Pearson, who is the property owner. We have Cyndi Walters, who is the brand new, I didn't know what I got into, CEO of National Lutheran Communities and Services. We have Bryan and Liz Barrett, and we have Nancy Robin, who are future residents of the village of Providence Point. I want to thank everybody for taking the time this morning to talk and learn a little bit about where we are. I think, we all sort of know if we follow the newspapers a little bit, this has been a project that has been in the news in the making for, I can say decades now, I guess. At this point. And it finally got the approval from the city of Annapolis. There was a lot of negotiations. There was a lot of opposition. And it ultimately came down to a really good, workable, manageable project. Of course, there's somebody that decides they want to appeal it, so we're waiting for that to go. But that just shouldn't have any kind of a bearing on moving forward. I mean, we've got the approval and everything else, so unless somebody turns it over, it's not really an issue. I kind of liken the folks that are appealing this as to the ones that were probably opposed initially, and then they got hyped up. When the negotiations started, it was like, they said, okay, well, we're going to go. We're going to take the off-ramp. We're going to work on it. And they just kept on going down the highway and trying to figure out what to do. So I saw a letter in the paper this morning or this weekend, and it was, as soon as you read it and then you get to the real video, they're destroying the entire forest. And it's like, okay, so we've now moved up to that level where we're just using, which is kind of crazy. But that's where we are with the project. But we've certainly talked to the National Lutheran Community Services several different times throughout this period. And I think we even talked to the predecessors from Connecticut once. Wanted to talk to Janet Richardson Pearson, who is, I don't know whether the brainchild behind this, but you are the property owner. You've owned the property. And how long have you had the property for?
I think since 1997. 96 on one parcel and 97 the following year.
Through your ownership of this, and you've lived on the property, you've enjoyed the waterfront, and the property is just absolutely beautiful. You've got and I think it's called the Dressage Institute. Did I get that right?
Chesapeake Dressage Institute, yes. It's an equestrian training facility.
Right, mm-hmm. And notably here in Annapolis, you've got the Wellness House, which was, I guess, the original farmhouse on the land.
Yeah, well, not that. It's 1840, 1860, and late 1800s, built in 3 stages.
Right.
So, yeah, it's pretty old. We renovated it years ago because it needed it.
But a while ago, you decided to sell this and, downsize. Why did you decide to sell?
Well, it started out that, first of all, we heard on the grapevine that there was going to be a big, huge housing project called Steeplegate that was going to have something like 600 and some homes, and we saw plans for it, and it had actually been approved, but other people owned it at that point in time, and we were just, appalled because we live right
next door.
Practically next door, yes. So my late husband and I talked to the present owners, and actually Crystal Spring Farm was a handshake deal. They met and talked. We made our offer. They shook our hand, and we followed through. And then I lost him shortly after that, and so then I was able to purchase Maskey Farm a year later. And it was basically to stop the huge development. But after a while, I realized that in order to preserve, because I wanted to preserve as much as I could, especially the Maskey Farm property, and that I needed to be a little more practical and sell part of it for the rest of it to save the rest.
Interesting. Well, how did we get to a continuing care community?
Well,
I'm sure Walmart was.
Walmart was very no, really. Walmart was talking to me, and I had developers wanting to do housing projects. Like I said, I kissed a lot of frogs before these guys came on the scene and with National Lutheran, and the whole idea of a continuing care community really appealed to me because of what I went through with my own parents. It took my mother lived in 5 different places before she ended up in hospice. And that's just too much. It's very disconcerting to have to move from place to place as she deteriorated. And so that was a big part of it, going through that whole process with my mom and somewhat with my dad to see if we could do something a lot better. And I really like the idea of the continuing care, that you could stay in place and not, services can start coming to you.
That's one thing is beautiful. Both of my parents were in a continuing care community down in Florida, and just absolutely wonderful. And it's a different type of a concept than what I knew when I was growing up. I mean, it's I look at the lifestyles of adults today, and I go, wow, my father was traveling and golfing at 95.
That's wonderful.
So we're much more, and I'm counting myself into that now as I'm getting up there as well. But it's the lifestyle is much more active, and it's not okay. Well, it's time to put Grammy in the nursing home.
Absolutely.
I turned 60. My kids didn't get me the walker. It's,
hey, wait till your kids turn 60.
Right. They're all working. I've set out rules. I said, you need to save for your retirement. You've got to contribute to your 401k. Okay. And since I put you in diapers for the first 3 years of your life, you need to contribute at least 3 years to Dad's diaper fund when I need it. So they understand what's going on. But we've been going on with this for over 10 years on this at least. And how did you keep your eye focused on the end result without sitting there saying, okay, fine, Alice Walton, come on up, let's talk, let's build that Walmart, let's build the Best Buy, because and I realize there's some zoning issues that went in would have been a challenge there, but there's probably were plenty of other easier ways to move the property. I mean, you could have sold it to the city or the county at some point if they had the money. You could have kept it and just put it in a trust, and which some of it already is now as it moves forward. Yeah,
I at first, right away when I annexed into the city, I told them that I was going to put the Mesky Farm in a trust, environment, not to be built on trust. And then also, just to get this in, there's a berm on the side of the road, and I put the berm there and filled it with trees. So the whole side, right-hand side, leading to the horse facility is a big grove of trees that we planted from little things like this. And so, but I can't count those as my trees when I reforest, which I didn't think was fair, but Yeah, well, I mean, when I was trying to think, what do I want to do with this property? And I don't want a big housing development because we lived through Hunt Meadow, because when I used to live further down the road, Hunt Meadow came into being, and they were cutting all the trees and this and that, and we used to ride through there in the trails. So did not want a big housing project, and was looking at options, and then the idea of a retirement community, I just found it very appealing. Less traffic, nice facility for elderly, with the new cutting-edge thinking of how older people need and want to live. And that was sort of it.
I laud you for everything that you've done. Nobody wants another 650 single-family homes coming in with, and not that we don't love kids, and not that we don't love, but the burdens on the schools, and as opposed to a continuing care community that's. And
don't forget, they're going to bulldoze down all those trees. You look at the plot of the first Steeplegate thing, and there's no trees or no acknowledgement of wetlands, anything like that.
Well, that's one of the things that people lose sight about. Okay, we do need to have progress in this world.
Yeah.
Look where we are because of progress in just any aspect. And with that, there are some trade-offs. Okay. Yes, when we build the village of Providence Point, we are going to lose some trees. They are going to be replanted at other locations, perhaps in the city. And the net loss is going to be nothing eventually.
Which is really, I think, the first time they've ever had a major project have that.
Yeah.
It's groundbreaking. It's
Yeah.
the restrictions and the environmental things that they did in this project are outstanding. In fact, Mr. Tom Smith at City Planning and said that this project will be the most environmentally sensitive one in this area, if not the state of Maryland.
Wow.
Well, it does. It works with the impervious surfaces. It deals with that. It deals with the cleanup of Crab Creek. That's Crab Creek, right? That's back on there. That does that. You've got traffic, which is it's not going to harm it, and it possibly could improve it a little bit. And
well, that was the one thing that was interesting when they did the independent traffic study by an independent person that was selected, I think, by the city, or anyway, I mean, it was not National Lutheran's person, it was an outside person. And this person said that with the improvements in the new road, that traffic would be better in the future with this than it is at its present time. And that's pretty impressive.
Well, that's one thing that I always thought, going in the myriad of conversations we've had, is that we can turn around and say, okay, you need to shave off 100 feet of your property to put a 7-lane highway in, whatever it may be. I mean, nobody would do that, but the city calls the shots on that. There's plenty of ways to make the road wide enough to handle whatever types of traffic. And yes, you need to put in all the traffic signals. And it was sort of a red herring, I thought, as far as when they said, the traffic.
They're putting in an extra turn lane, and they're going to synchronize all the traffic lights. So that's a big improvement right there.
Well, and I realize that. I mean, we are on a peninsula, which there is one way in and one way out, and there's a couple ways if you know the back roads, but it's generally, and that's any peninsula. It doesn't matter where you are. I laud you for doing it and having the foresight to do it, and the tenacity to stick through.
Some people call it stubbornness, but we won't say that.
Well, I'll tell you, we also wanted to talk to Cyndi Walters, who is the new CEO of National Lutheran Community Services. How are you? You're nothing like Larry Bradshaw.
No, you'll find that out very quickly.
You have a little bit more hair, and you're probably a little bit more stressed now because he's retired down in Florida.
Yeah, and I had a lot of learning to do in the last 11 years to catch up with everything. Yes.
Well, that's great. I mean, like I said, we've talking with Larry, but how did you come into National Lutheran Community Services?
Wow. Oh, my goodness. That happened in 2012 because of a long-standing relationship I had with Larry when I used to be at KPMG. And I was a partner in their National Senior Living Consulting Division. Okay. And Larry and I worked together when I was a partner and a consultant. And I started to help National Lutheran in their growth that they started back in 2012. So opening the Village at Orchard Ridge in Winchester, Virginia, opening up the home care agencies that we have today, helping to expand what we have at the Village at Rockville, and then became the Chief Operating Officer in 2016.
Well, you guys have many properties, and for those that aren't aware of that, I mean, you operate, you mentioned Rockville, I think there's some in Northern Virginia, and the organization itself has been around for 100 plus years.
132 years.
132 years. So you've got some experience under your belt to be able to figure that out. As we move forward, and again, we briefly mentioned that the court challenge is it's not a roadblock, it's a bump. I mean, what other bumps do we see? Any bumps that are, as the project moves forward? Of course, we don't always see all the bumps, but
yeah, of course. And I would be remiss to even say, and I think all of us are seeing a little bit of some of the bumps in terms of the challenges with inflation, the challenges with supply chain, the unknowns that this current environment has taken for all of us. But right now, I would say to you that we are moving along as it relates to the most important piece of this, and that is the sales process and obtaining all the depositors that we need to be able to break ground. So that's moving along for us. We are closely reaching that 100 mark of the 160 that we need to be able to break ground. So we believe that will happen sometime late fall this year.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, without any commitments, we're not putting it in writing. But I mean, what is the general timeline? I mean, if you assume that the late fall, I mean, where where do we look? Because we're joined at the table by two future residents, and they're like salivating here.
Holding our breath.
We're not getting any younger.
Time is definitely a commodity. So basically, again, with what the Department of Aging requires of us, we do need to hit that 160 mark, which is 65% pre-sales. We do expect to hit that late fall. If that happens, groundbreaking can occur fairly quickly right after that, and then it's just the time to build. So yeah.
What would you guess to build out one sense? A couple years.
You could measure it in months, but yes, about 24 months.
24 months.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's getting exciting to see it here, and I've been a fan. I mean, I'm not going to apologize. I've been a fan of the project from day one, and actually probably 4 or 5 iterations. We probably would have disagreed back when the Barretts were opposed to it, but I do think it's good. I think that as you look at aging adults in the community, there's so many different options. I mean, you've got the aging at home, you've got more traditional nursing homes, you've got various levels of affluence that will work at different things. And one thing, my parents were in a similar community in Florida. Separately, they were divorced a long time ago, but ultimately ended up in the same community. It was kind of a weird thing, but that was. But the neat thing I find about it is that the residents and every one of them was involved in some way, shape, or form, whether it be with the community itself or whether the larger community of the city. I know my father was chairman of the local SPCA for years down there, and he's got a plaque and a dog statue named after him there. So it's, and I mean that was his passion to get out there. And there were others that it was down on the water, so there was passions that were boating. They worked with underaged or underprivileged kids to teach them and get them experience into boating. And I find that Annapolis is a very robust community as far as, and we're very diverse as well. I mean, we've got very, very low income, and we've got, very, very wealthy and a myriad in between. But we've got a number of different opportunities for community. And the people that are going to be moving into Providence Point are prime for that. I mean, they're generally all retired, so there's some time. So they're not going to hit the rush hours, hopefully. I mean, who gets up at 7 in the morning and says, hey, I think I want to go out on Forest Drive for a little bit. Although I have found the trick that if you can catch any one of those lights, get up to 40 to 43 miles an hour, you can make it all the way out to Route 50 without a traffic light. But the folks that are going to be moving into the community are really going to be, I find, giving back. And I would assume that that's not going to be any different here as it comes. The folks that have been laughing over on the other corner are Bryan and Liz Barrett, who are Annapolis residents currently. You said before we started recording, you said you lived over near West Annapolis. And how long have you been in town for?
We live in West Annapolis, and I've been here since I immigrated from the United Kingdom, from England, in 1989, which is when Liz and I were married. So I've lived here since then. Actually, we lived for a couple of years in San Diego at the turn of the decade, but we always kept our house here. But Liz has lived in the house where we live now since 1981.
Oh wow!
When she bought the house there, so long-term resident of Annapolis.
I understand that you guys were initially, when I'll say Crystal Spring came on the radar way back when, you guys were kind of opposed to it.
I was dead set against it. I couldn't believe that they were going to do that in that location, because we don't have that many forests around, and I couldn't say I'm really an active environmentalist of any sort, other than trying to follow what I think is good practice. And I agreed with the people that were opposed to it. So I was on their cart for a long time, just hoping that they would keep it from happening.
But I was going to say, when you look at the fact, I just within the last few days got an email from Weingrad detailing of, and my heavens, what a wonderful story of a successful story of negotiation and working with the city and working with the city planning and environmentalists, and I mean every complaint was not only dealt with, but gone beyond in terms of the planning. I mean, it's really excellent.
Well, Gerald really did a good job. I mean, he was very adamant. He dug his heels in.
Sure.
He was. I guess the best thing that he did was to get National Lutheran as well as the city to listen. And
I think it's kind of reversed. Let me just put a plug in for Larry, because Larry went down to the city after the other developers left, and he rolled up his sleeves and he said, "What do we have to do to get this project through?" And he just listened to them, and he worked with every issue they had. And some of those issues Gerald Weingrat had been talking to the city people about, so he was very much a part of that initial going through with all the changes and what all. And so we really give Larry a lot of credit. He really dug his heels in. He's a diplomat in his personality, and he's really a good guy. And he had a good agenda. I mean, he didn't come across as, a carpetbagger or anything like that. And so I like to all of the participants, of course, but I think Larry needs a special acknowledgement of all that he did.
Yeah. He was also a brave guy. I was at a couple of those public meetings.
Oh.
Throwing the darts. They've got the kerosene and the brooms and the pitchforks out back. Grab one on the way in. They were pretty rough. And again, Janet, to your point, it's much better in any kind of business to work with people that you like, that you can get along with. I mean, working with jerks is no fun for anybody, and it's really makes a lot of sense. And a lot of people say that there's too many options. I mean, that's one of the arguing points that the people that have appealed this have said. There's too many options for adults in Annapolis, in the Annapolis area, and yes, we do have some nursing homes, and we do have any number of different options, and this is not for everybody, and that's there are some people that say there's no way I'm going into any type of an institutional, and I'm going to sit at home, and that's fine, but we sit there and we look at Providence Point, and I guess my question is with the options. I mean, there's I don't want to name competition because I don't think they are, but I mean, you've got Chrisley and you've got
Ginger Cove,
Sunrise, and any number
of
ones. But what was it that attracted you about the lifestyle at Providence Point?
That's hard to say since it's not in existence yet. What we hope the lifestyle at Providence Point would be having a new group of new forever friends and starting a life that is our forever life. And this business about when we retire, I mean, I don't think we've ever retired. People talk about when you retire.
Right.
Well, when we both have retired, we've started something else. So we're still actively doing stuff. And we're looking to continue to be active in the community and have Providence Point be our springboard for continuing living.
Yeah, sorry, just to add that, I think I would stress that point about being, all of us will be coming in at the same time. It's not. We as I'm sure you have also looked at a number of other options, and I think the concept. I think it'll be quite difficult to sort of plant yourself into an existing operation, existing organization, and be able to make the kind of friends that you would make when you all are joining something together at the same time in a new place.
Big party.
And so I think that's one point. I mean, there's another. You say, why do we choose this rather than another? There is a financial aspect of it, which is the fact that Providence Point is, has basically a Type C fee-for-service CCRC, and which by no means do they all have that. And if as we have a substantial amount of long-term care insurance, we would look for somewhere which takes account of that and provides, as they call it, a Type C CCRC arrangement. Now, that's not the case with, I give you an example, which is Bay Woods, is a condominium. You buy a condominium. Well, do I want when I, finally going in vertical, come out horizontal, when I finally fall off my perch, do I really want my children who are in England and in France to suddenly find themselves owner of a condominium in Annapolis? I mean, out of the question.
My kids are not going to take care of you.
Right. So, that is an important consideration of the affordability and the financial aspects of it.
Well, I mean, Providence Point is also it's a return on investment type of a program. I mean, you pay a fee to get in, and then, when you pass away, a portion of that goes back to the estate. Is that true?
It depends. Yes.
Oh, you've got different abilities to do that?
3 different options there. You can pay a large amount, and that exactly then a substantial amount of that goes on to your heirs, or a somewhat less amount, or you can pay a smaller amount, and all of that, you don't get anything back. The heirs don't get anything back, so that's a one-time payment.
Well, that's great. I think I got $100 in my car. Can we? Can we?
So, but the fee-for-service aspect of it, once you're in, is that you pay a monthly fee, and then if you go into assisted living, it's somewhat more. If you go into nursing home, it's considerably more. And that is where, if you have long-term care insurance, then you claim against those. And
that's the beautiful thing about a facility like this, is that you're independent. I mean, you will have your vehicle, and you can go out to the coffee shop, and you can go downtown to eat at whatever restaurant you want, and enjoy life that Annapolis is known for.
For sure.
But I know that when my mother, she fell and she broke her hip, and then they had the ability to care for her temporarily outside of her place. It was beautiful to be able to be there and remain as active as you can. And I know all these communities have so much going on as far as well, first of all, the food, anyone that I've been into is amazing, but but the activities for the residents within the property as well as off the property, the culture and everything else really is pretty phenomenal. Let me talk to Nancy here, who is a resident of Anne Arundel County, I understand, for 40 years.
Crofton for 40 years.
Oh, my word.
And we moved here because my husband got a job working for the legislature in Annapolis. So we were very familiar with Annapolis. In fact, when we first moved in, there was no Annapolis Mall. And so shopping was very limited. But we always loved the charm of downtown Annapolis. And before we had kids and as we got babysitters, we would spend a lot of time there. As we were aging, my husband got sicker and sicker, and I began to think I knew he would pass away before me, and what am I going to do? I could not, by the way, have gotten my husband out of Crofton for anything. He loved it there. He had a small community-based law practice there, knew everybody, and that was really his home. But I was looking forward to what the rest of my life would be. I had never heard of Crystal Springs. I had never heard of the village until just a few months ago. I had really not even started looking because my daughter, who has my only grandchildren, and we were thinking of all moving to Frederick. We love Frederick, and we were thinking of going up there. But for some reason or other, they changed their minds and decided to stay in Anne Arundel County, which was fine with me. I like it down here very much. So that's when I started seriously looking. I won't say I visited any place. I didn't. I did it all online, except for here. And a lot of the objections that I can sort of sense in some of what you said, I found people who talked about moving into like Harold Harbor and having homes, and they said they like it, but they didn't know they had to worry about shoveling snow and doing grass. I'm now a widow, and those are the problems I have. Who's going to shovel the snow? Who's going to take care of all the things that have to be done around a house? I have a lot of help because a lot of people continue to do work for me, but I've gotten to the point I don't want to be doing that. I want to have a life that's more of a life for me. And I'm living in a neighborhood that's transitioning to younger folks. They're very nice, very pleasant. But what do I have in common with people with new babies? I just don't. And so I want a place like with community. And when I came to the first social that I came to here, and I asked everybody that I spoke with, what do you see? Why are you coming here? They all said the same thing, community. We want a sense of community. We want to have friends. We want to have activities. That's exactly what I want. And when I explained it to my kids, and I was really excited about it, they looked at me and they said, Mom, it's going to be like going back to college without the homework. And I said,
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I like the idea of being new, too. I thought about the very same thing, no cliques or anything. I mean, we'll form our own cliques, I guess. But the whole idea of just walking into a new place, and we'll be the architects of what we want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And I like that. So I'm very excited.
Well,
So-
it's certainly a huge commonality that everybody will share.
Yes.
I imagine you guys all get together and squawk about like the nail pops in the ceiling and, and stuff like that once it finally
No,
gets
it's going to
built.
be perfect.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's. What does your family think about? I mean, are they all on board now?
Oh, my son is beyond happy because when we were talking about Frederick, he said, you mean I'm going to have to drive all the way up to Frederick? He's in Anne Arundel County for Thanksgiving and Christmas. He said, I don't want to have to do that. So he's happy. Everybody is happy. My daughter's staying in Anne Arundel County. He's staying in Anne Arundel County. And unfortunately, most of my friends don't live in Anne Arundel County, and that's been another problem with the pandemic and not seeing them because they're scattered all over the D.C. area because I worked in D.C. So I'm staying, I had hoped that I would be closer to the beach. And when I did a Google map search, I found I only saved 6 minutes moving this way because of the having to drive back up Forest Drive. But I'm extremely excited. I just wish it were next year that I would be moving in, truly. I mean, I'm cleaning my house out already. I'm just so excited.
Hey, Florida never crossed your mind?
Well, I have a long experience with Florida, and Florida has many lovely places, but both my in-laws and parents retired down there. I went down there many, many times. To me, personally, Florida's a nice place to visit, but it's just not for me. Too hot, too many bugs, alligators, all the other stuff, and tourists. And I want to stay in Maryland. I love it here. So grew up here, love the water, love the bay, love everything.
Where'd you grow up?
In Baltimore.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you don't have snow to shovel down in Florida, but
No. I love snow. I'm a winter girl, so see, it's too warm down there for me.
Well, I think that it's just you had mentioned that the life as we aged, our lifestyles change and the different communities change around you.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around my neighborhood, and I'm like, they don't look like me. They've all got little itty bitty kids. The school buses are coming, and my kids are flown and grown at this point. So it's interesting to see that, and I'm finding that I'm having less and less in common with some of my neighbors, and maybe it's time to move to Providence Point for me, or maybe it's to someplace else, just to similar to what you had said, Nancy. I mean, you've got to travel to get to your crowd.
I think the pandemic has done a lot of that
huge
to
amount.
us too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, before we find out that even now, and as things relax, although then they tighten up, we were always entertaining and doing things. All of a sudden, we need to invite somebody to dinner, and you've stopped doing that. You've been happy to do the things that you can do kind of by yourselves and separated. So it's not quite as big a jump as it would have been 10 years ago.
Well, you found ways to, for lack of a better word, to play by yourself.
Exactly.
And,
so now we're looking to meet new friends to play with.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And the pandemic has really, in some instances, really helped. I know, like from technology and connectivity and everything else, it's really advanced the business world certainly 20 years. You look at the federal government that's now realizing that these hundreds of thousands of people can now all work at home. And a lot of them can. And how you coordinate with everybody is amazing. But again, it's also made us a whole bunch of introverts, I think, which I really. I know when we first broke out of it, I was like, oh, man, that's right. Okay, now make sure you wear your pants when you go to this meeting. We're meeting in person. And
It's true.
I mean, Zoom and everything else is wonderful, but I hate to think that handshakes are going away, but there's still a lot of people that will go for the fist bump, and I think that's just sort of a cultural change that we're going to need to sort of get addressed to and figure out.
Yeah, it's never. I mean, it is. The world in general, let alone locally, is never going to be the same. I mean, it's a different place than it used to be.
Did anybody here ever think they were going to live through a pandemic or see a pandemic?
For sure.
I never saw that one coming.
Yeah, I did.
Did you?
Yeah, just reading. You'd read about these different viruses that come out of Africa and Asia with a live animal markets, and there's a lot of stories, suspense stories that were written about it. And my husband and I would always say, well, one day it'll hit us. We didn't think it'd be so soon, and we didn't think that the response would be as crazy as it's been.
Now avian flu has finally been found in one human. So if one human has avian flu, and what is that going to do?
And with people traveling the way they do around the globe, there's no way to stop it.
Yeah, that's crazy. For sure.
It's funny, as I look around the table, too, I also note that Bryan and I are the only ones that bring in any testosterone here, and it seems to be it's all these women that have a vision as to what they want to do. I mean, we've got, Nancy, who's got this, vision to come from Crofton and, down here, and certainly Janet, who had the vision to do that, and we've got Cyndi, who's got a vision for National Lutheran Community and Service, and we've got, and we absolutely have Liz, who's, just excited there. And I mean, women have sort of played, and I think National Lutheran that was founded by a woman too, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. If you go back to the history of 132 years ago, it was a similar situation. It was a woman with a vision. It was Sarah Udemill who basically had land. We knew what we wanted to do in terms of creating some type of a senior living community, a way in which to provide senior living services. And she donated the land. And she as well had a vision of what she was looking for 132 years ago. So here we are, fast forward, what we're doing here with Janet, and couldn't be more pleased with the way this has worked for us and the way we have been able to work so well together. And I know it's been a long journey, and it sure has been. And I empathize with all of you because I can see the excitement, and I'm excited for you all because I have seen what it can be. I've seen it in some of our other properties. I've seen how the residents are the ones that create the community. They create the culture, and it's their affinity to the different things that provide them with that sense of passion that they're able to create within the community. So for me to sit here and say, this is what it's going to be like, and this is everything that they're going to do, I would never say that because it's really about each one of you and what you create.
And I would say, just from my limited experience with my parents down in Florida, that the residents, you built the buildings and you build the restaurants and the food services and the facilities, but it's the residents that really make it the home. I mean, it's
for sure, yeah.
I'm waiting for the first piano to get donated to they say that someone will donate a piano because I'm looking for that to be in that bar area.
So are we looking for the piano or are we looking for the bar? What do we?
The bar's there. We've seen pictures of the bar. We just haven't seen pictures of any piano.
Do you play?
We're into music. We're both music. I sing and Bryan plays the cello.
I play with the London Town Symphony here in town. Yeah.
Then you know Buzz Dillinger.
Oh, very well.
Of course I do. I might say I sit exactly. I'm also a cellist,
okay.
And so Buzz and I sit one behind the other.
Buzz is great. You've got a concert coming up pretty soon. With,
how about Saturday?
With the Eastport Oyster Boys at Maryland
exactly.
Hall.
And if anybody is doing nothing on Saturday night, 7:30 at Maryland Hall, very nice concert actually. It'll be. I'm sure it will.
I saw that. 2 years ago, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago. You did it with the Eastport Oyster Boys. It was kind of interesting to see.
Yes, I wasn't playing. I used to play with the Columbia Symphony for many years, and at that time I wasn't with London Town, but I have now been with a couple of years.
Are you way off topic again? But are you familiar with Encore Creativity?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, and I never could do it because I'm a ceramic artist, and I never could get their rehearsals. But it's always sounded wonderful. And their director
it sounds like
is
a great program.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's over 50 is where they do it. But I mean, and you don't really even have to have any talent. So that was where I sort of stepped to the front of the line. It was like, I said they put you in the back and sort of drown out your voice. But it's just wonderful. I mean, they've really changed because as probably when it was founded, and it's a pretty old organization, but it was, we'll say like the old fuddy-duddy music. But now that the younger people are getting older. Now they've got a whole rock thing that.
I was in that. That was wonderful.
In Encore.
The Encore rock.
Oh, very good.
We had such a good time. All the old things from our past, the music and singing, and there were enough people there that you could get drowned out. And this is a good thing if you're not a strong singer. One of the things that was interesting that I heard that the director had said is, if you can talk, you can sing. And I thought, that's so encouraging because usually everyone's so critical,
I go to church and hum because it's just really bad.
I have to jump in and give a plug to the Anne Arundel Community College music department because I sing with the community college and I have done and I do ceramics at the community college, and they are a really competent music department that offers really good stuff.
Very good.
So their concerts are also wonderful.
Well, I think we're very fortunate with AACC here in the area.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as nursing and culinary, and I mean, they've got some wonderful programs. 2/3 of my kids went through there because they had no clue what they wanted to do before, right out of high school, and it was just a wonderful opportunity for them. And I think it's great that Bryan and Liz said they're involved with the London Town community or the London Town Symphony Orchestra as well.
There's something that I didn't say as far as involvement in the community. In 2001, I was the founding director of All Children's Chorus of Annapolis, which is now a 100-member, very well-known and respected children's chorus. And our first rehearsal was on a 9/11, which was
perform
quite
every 4th of July.
They do. I started that for the swearing in of new citizens, and I always thought that was really cool.
That's one thing. If anybody's never seen this, and you should come out here for the 4th of July, it is amazing. In the Pecos House, signer of the Declaration of Independence, they bring in new citizens. They swear them in. So they have usually some muckety-muck from the federal government come and do the oath and everything else. And I didn't realize until probably 7 or 8 years ago that somebody could come in on a green card, work an entire career on a green card and not be a citizen, then just all of a sudden be it. But it's amazing to sit there and see these folks from every single country.
Like me.
I just had, choked me up. It's wonderful. And,
I was very proud of that. I have to say that I started that particular part of the ceremony and all that. And it's been great.
Yeah. It has. I mean, to your point, I mean, the folks that are moving into Providence Point are giving back. The whole cliche time, talent, and treasure. There is a certain level of affluence that comes in there. Again, it's not going to be the community for everybody, but they are going to be supporting our local organizations, volunteering, mentoring, maybe mentoring kids, maybe teaching, working with CRAB, which is the Chesapeake Region Accessible Boating. I hope I got that one right. Certainly the Children's Chorus of Annapolis or whatever it may be. Typically the folks that will be moving in here are going to be embedded deep into the community, and that's huge. That's huge for the city and the county and the state.
There is no doubt, and we have firsthand experience with that at some of our other communities, and I would even say it's with residents who maybe didn't think in those terms when they first moved in, but it evolved. It evolved by virtue of really getting more entrenched in the community, seeing where the needs were, and also it happens very organically. Sometimes it's a new skill or talent that's learned that you realize you could make a difference out in the community. I'll use one example that we have at one of our other communities. We had a number of women who could knit, crochet, something that most of us have learned when we were younger. They learned how to take plastic bags and knit mats for the homeless. And so they take them all around to the homeless shelters and the homeless areas within the community by virtue of giving them a mat that keeps the wet, that keeps the water away. That's just one example of many that we have of ways in which and we get a lot of requests. So we'll get a request or a call to action, and it's our residents that take the call. So
Nice.
Absolutely.
Great.
And then absolutely, as Janet was saying, COVID, I will admit to you, I never thought we'd be in year 3 of dealing with this pandemic. But I would say to you, I always feel that change equals opportunity. And we see a lot of opportunity that has happened by virtue of this pandemic in terms of the way that we design, in terms of the way that we were able to use technology. And technology has expedited so dramatically by virtue of what we've had to do through the pandemic. And we've learned ways for air quality, ways in which to ensure that if social isolation has to occur, it doesn't have to occur at the same magnitude as we had when we first learned of COVID in 2020. Those days are gone, in my opinion. In my opinion, we've learned so much from that we can do what we need to do to feel safe without creating such an impediment to everyone's lifestyle.
I know National Lutheran has communities in very similar areas. I mean, they're very rich culturally. They're very diverse as far as, incomes and, race and gender, the whole 9 yards, which really makes for a good place to live. I mean, I've been to some friends that are out in the middle of Nebraska, and you sit there and it's pretty homogenous, and which is probably very fine for some people. I mean, I like variety. I like to see. I don't know if anybody got down to see the Pride Parade down in Annapolis over the weekend, and it was just it was a nice event. The St. Patrick's Day Parade, the way the community comes together for everything is just it's pretty amazing. It's grown, certainly. I mean, over the years that you've seen it. And it will continue to grow.
Yeah.
And
It's
we just need
beautiful.
to figure out how to do it smartly.
That's a tenet of urban growth, that people have this idea that they love a certain area and they don't want it to change. But it either has to grow or die. So if it doesn't grow, it's going to be the opposite. And you can see that in certain areas that are sort of, they're not places to visit anymore. They're not vital. They don't have new things. And so you just have to accept change is inevitable.
That's the one thing that does sort of frustrate me about the city government within the city is that and the Historic Preservation Commission tends to be a little bit restrictive. I mean, I remember when they wanted to replace wood columns with the fiberglass columns that looked identical to it, and they ultimately lost in court to do it. And I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of dollars they spent fighting it. And I'm like, okay, if you really want the city the way it was, well, let's just turn off your water. We'll give you a little bit of a bucket to, take care of your business, and just toss it out into the street and let it flow down into the creek. That's how it works. Progress does come, and obviously there are costs with it. But I do get so tired of when you hear, I like it the way it was.
But it hasn't been that way for a long time. Gavin has been incredible for upping even the vision of what the city of Annapolis can be and will be. And just seeing the garage come tumbling down was very exciting.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a long time coming. And one thing I will give Gavin credit for, I mean, he's a dreamer and he's not afraid to try something.
For sure.
Right, exactly.
And I think you need to do that. And you've got to be reasonable about it. And I mean, he was. I mean, he's had a couple missteps, and he's
for sure
backs right off and says, okay, well, I think this can work.
Yeah.
This testing that they're doing down on Market Space with the sort of pseudo-permanent outdoor dining behind the Market House and around, I think if they get rid of traffic on there and boardwalk that over or something like that, that's going to be a fabulous space.
Yeah.
And, we'll be interested to see how City Dock goes. I mean, I give him a lot of credit for what he's done.
I lived in Annapolis when they decided to have the traffic circle go the other way. This was in the late 60s, early 70s. There was a gas station, as you probably know, down where the flagpole is, was a gas station that was a roundabout. And the Market House was not what it is now, but watching them say, okay, now everybody has to go this way. And I stood in a building up over a sign of the wheel. I can remember watching the traffic, and it was hilarious. And as far as taking out the traffic circle, because a gas station left, nobody would stop going around the empty space.
Old habits die
So
hard.
it just stayed as a circle only because nobody knew what to do without it. Really weird. Were you here then?
I've been here. My late husband was born and raised in Annapolis, And my kids have been raised here, and I've been here 50 years.
Yeah, I have a little over 50, but it's some of the changes.
Big changes.
Right.
Yeah. They used to call it Nap Town, and for a good reason. Put you to sleep.
Yeah, well, I have some friends that grew up here that were, right before the mall, and it's riding the bikes down there to Weems Creek in the dirt and the fields, and you look there. I spoke with Liquor Mart and Deli, which is the orange, the red building with the yellow roof right at the corner of General's Highway across from what was Applebee's at the mall, and they opened up right before the mall was there.
Yeah.
And their initial boost of business was from the workers at the mall. They would come over and now it's been there now 40 years, I think now. They also own Ann's Dairy Cream, I think, up by...
I don't even know where a Dairy Queen is, but I tell you, when I moved to Annapolis, it took us... I lived down near Bay Ridge in Anchorage, and it took 5 minutes for me to get from Anchorage to Pearl.
And no
where
stop.
There was
no stop.
That was it. It was straight shot. And eventually, of course, it became a nightmare. But, 5 minutes, it was a great place to live.
Well, yes and no, because there were no great restaurants, there were no great shops. I remember when the first shishi shop came to town. It was called the San Francisco. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember San Francisco, but
it was like the first shop that had cool things other than just the other. And then Woolmeister's Ice Cream Parlor. Remember that? That was a big deal. And so it's for someone who has watched it through the 60s all the way through to now, everything's a trade-off. Everything's a trade-off. And I just like the fact that Annapolis is just really a wonderful place to go out and eat and have dinner, sit out in the sidewalks now and have a meal or a drink. So I think it's great.
It is. My best Annapolis story was when the ebb tide was still around, the little dive bar down on Bay Ridge, and I was sitting there. It was about 11 o'clock, and I look over, and I'm looking at this guy sitting at the bar next to me. Finally I said, "Are you Steve Forbes?" And he says, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, I think this is hysterical because Steve Forbes has been sitting here, and nobody in the bar except for me recognized who he was." And I was like, "Well, what are you doing here?" He said, "Well, we had a thing we were doing at the academy. We had the boat down here, and we asked the mate, I want to just sort of go to a dive bar, and this is what they recommend." I said, "Well, give the guy a raise." I said, he picked the right one. And we just had a great time talking. My parents had a farm. There was a couple of farms down from his father, Malcolm Forbes, up in North Jersey. So I'd never met him, but it was kind of fun. We were reminiscing about that. And at the end of the night, I'm like, okay, so now I'm going to go out into the night, and I'm going to assess whether I'm driving home or walking home. Depending on how much I've had at the ebb tide, and you're going to call for a limousine and go to your $300 million yacht, and we're never going to see each other. And he says, "Well, conceptually, you're right." He says, "Your math is a little bit off." And I said, that's the perfect way to end the, perfect ending to a night at the ebb tide with Steve Forbes. But, you just never know who you run. I was at the Naval Academy on I-Day one time, and all the incoming plebes were told you say, good morning, ma'am, good morning, sir, to everybody you see. And, it didn't matter who you were. You didn't have to be enlisted or anything. It was like, "Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. Good morning." And it was cacophony. And all of a sudden, Jimmy Buffett rolls out. He was doing something there. And I'm looking at these kids, and their mind is just blown. It's like, I have no idea what I've gotten myself into. I've been on buses. I've been unloaded. I've been poked. I've been prodded. I've been warned about this and that. I'm holding things up, saluting, "Yes, ma'am, no, ma'am." And Jimmy Buffett's here. So it's such a unique town, and the lifestyle that the village of Providence Point is going to afford to everybody that's in there is just going to be absolutely wonderful. The key is to get as Bryan said, get the spades in the ground, and everybody will be a lot happier at this point. And hopefully, as Cyndi said, it might be probably the fall. Fingers crossed. Well, I want to thank everybody so much for your time today, and in a larger sense, I want to thank you guys all for your commitment to Annapolis. I'm a resident here, as we all are, and what you've done, by buying into, by staying in the community, by moving into the community from Crofton, and from certainly preserving the community on your aspect is just wonderful, because it is going to help Annapolis continue on. For the next generation. So but I do appreciate your time. It's been great to meet you, and we'll check back in after after that first month, we'll check on the nail pops in the ceiling. And see
Check the bar and see if there's a piano there.
That's right. Where's the piano and is it in the bar? That's great. Is there anything that we need to know that's new and exciting, or that we may not have covered already yet, Cyndi? Do you know?
Oh my goodness, I could go on forever about everything that's new and exciting that we're doing. I would say this, we're right now working on construction design, so that in itself is exciting on our part in order to make the vision the reality in terms of what we're doing. I would say to you that everything we do is intentional to that dream, discover, explore kind of concept that we have for the village, and in doing so, we're making it very multifaceted, so that again, the space is going to be there for the residents to create it to what they want it to be and what they want to do with the space.
Well, if anyone wants to look at it, you want to go to thevillageatprovidencepoint.org. And that's a real long domain name, but it's pretty obvious what it is. And if you can get over to 1997 Annapolis Parkway Exchange, or maybe just called Annapolis Exchange Parkway, it's the 5-story building across from the mall on Jennifer Road. And you do have a sample unit in here, right?
We do, yes. We have a sample apartment here within the sales center that people can go to and actually see the reality of it. Absolutely.
Okay, and is this open all the time, pretty much like 9 to 5, that generally?
I believe it is. I know it's at least Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and I know at least weekends by appointment, if not more than that.
Okay, so thevillageatprovidencepoint.org is where you'd want to go. You could probably set up an appointment to come look, get all your questions answered that we certainly haven't been able to cover 100% of it here with Janet, Cyndi, and Bryan and Liz and Nancy. But that's it's an exciting time, and
For sure.
Again, thank you guys very much for making our community better, and it is our community. So.
And thank you for giving us a forum to be able to start to share the story, because the story is a good story and it's based in facts, and it gives us the opportunity to share the facts, of the journey we took, to share the facts of what it took to get the approvals, of all the concessions we've made to be able to say that we have this wonderful partnership with the city of Annapolis, and almost have set a standard for any other environmentally sensitive types of project going forward. Thank you for giving us a forum to be able to.
And I just one more thing I wanted to add in too, Janet, with that. I mean, I don't know the finances of the whole thing, but I'm going to venture to say that there probably were many more options that you could have made a little bit more money than with National Lutheran Communities and Services. That.
Well, I had already looked at so many things prior to them, and once we came on board, I never wavered because I thought it was perfect. Based on my personal experience with my mom, and just thinking, what is the best thing I could put on this property that has the least amount of violating the environment or having too much traffic or whatever. I didn't have a lot of say-so with the first iteration with the developers out of state. And they wanted to get as much out of the property as they could with so many things they put in it. But now it's something to be really proud of in terms of preserving the environment and trees. I'm a tree hugger too. And all the facets and the accommodations that National Lutheran made, a really amazing list of accommodations they made.
Yeah, I think it's impressive.
Thank you guys all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This has been a bonus podcast from Eye on Annapolis. Please visit us at eyeonannapolis.net. Follow us on Facebook at All Annapolis and on Twitter at Eye on Annapolis. And if you haven't subscribed to the Daily News Brief podcast, go for it. And all of your local news will be delivered to your phone, tablet, or smart device by 6 a.m. every Monday through Friday.